So you can access it there at our website under our webinar archives. That should go up in a couple of days. Also, if you have a question throughout the course of the webinar, please feel free to ask it. I will be tracking them. And the question bar should appear on your panel. So at any time, you can ask a question. We are not doing hands raised in this webinar. We are only doing questions by chat. And they will be posed to Naz at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. So I think that's it for those kinds of items. So let me tell you a little bit about DCL before you get started. DCL blends years of conversion experience with cutting-edge technology and the infrastructure to make the process easy and efficient. We are, as our name kind of tips you off, a data conversion firm. Data conversion covers everything from corporations to organizations, libraries, to individual conversions such as for ebooks. We offer world-class services and leading-edge technology with global capability. We transform your valuable content. XML and HTML conversion is at the top of our list, but as you can see here, we offer a full range of services. We serve a very broad client base, which we're quite proud of, spanning all industries. So that gives you an idea of some of the industries that we serve. And before I hand this over to Naz, who I am so pleased to work with, Naz has been a partner and friend to DCL for quite a long time. Naz Urbina is an established content strategy thought leader, consultant, and trainer specializing in cutting-edge, multi-channel, business-driven projects. Since 2000, he's provided services to Fortune 500 organizations and small to medium enterprises. Naz is the founder of Urbina Consulting. He's newly independent. We're very happy for him. He's the co-author of Content Strategy, Connecting the Dots Between Business, Brand, and Benefits, and I believe he'll tell you a little bit more about the book at the end of the session. Since 2006, Naz has been the events chair and content director for Congility.com, which he will also tell you a little bit more about at the end of the session. And now it is my pleasure to hand this over to Naz Urbina.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you for that introduction. Some of you on the session may know me already. I do make a habit of trying to present every month or so. And I think Jennifer gave me a good overview. Those of you who have known me for a few years will know me mainly from my work in technical communications, content strategy, and my new practice is expanding out to kind of focus on this nexus point between management, user, and technology. I have a real passion for connecting people across various industry silos, departmental silos, and across the various formats that they use. And that's kind of what this webinar is directly and indirectly about standards and how we can use that to bridge gaps between us. Okay, so before I take off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the situation that we're in. So why is it interesting and important to learn about standards? If you're in this industry, if you're in communications and content, then you will have been hearing a lot about the right format, the right content, the right time. There are so many of these. I've seen slides that go on to list a dozen or more right things. So I've just been starting to call it the right list. We all need to get the right content, format, language, and time to our customers. But however, that is becoming exceedingly more complicated with each passing year. We have these these images that we show about showing all the plethora of the devices that are coming out. And when we think about multi-channel as a term, we're often thinking about multi-device display, rendering for multiple formats. But multi-channel is actually a much bigger concept than that when you start to introduce things like the social channels that you might be delivering content through, which might require yet another type of formatting, yet another type of subset of your content or flavor of your content, which you're going to deliver in a different way. Then there's, of course, good old-fashioned print. And I've just seen some articles that have come out talking about how print is staying alive. It's fending for itself. And one of the reasons that print is actually becoming interesting again, and people are stopping this chant of print is dead, is because it is expensive and it is slow. And people realize it's expensive and slow. So therefore, personalized print and really good quality print impresses people. People know that it's cheap to customize emails or electronic communications compared to print. So if you do take the time to give them a really nice customized printed handbook, customized printed brochure, or something that really has taken extra effort to deliver in a print medium, people will recognize the value of that. And print is actually becoming back as a bit of a luxury item. Also, one of the neglected channels I think that people forget to think about when thinking about multi-channel is the deliverable itself inside the product. I think in TechCom specifically, we've been trying to say that TechComms is part of the product for many years. However, it's becoming very literally part of the product in the past few years. I'm getting more and more clients who want to do things like embed actual content inside a hardware device that has a screen. This example here is a new Nikon, or Nikon, depending on which side of the pond you're from, camera that has a guide mode in it, so that when you're using the camera, you can switch it into a help-enabled mode, so that you can walk through tutorials, learn about concepts and references, and be guided through complex tasks, so you can learn while doing, which most people will tell you is the best way to learn. In the software world, I've got an example here from a product called Ableton Live, which I've used in several sessions before. You might be able to see that in a couple of other webinars I've done. And Ableton has this, this concept of being a very real-time app. It goes with the name Live. There are not one, but two embedded help views in the product where you can see content that is either reused from or very similar to what you might find in a manual, but it's right there in the product in a sub-window of the main interface. So as you're navigating, you've got help being made available in a navigable way in a sort of embedded help browser, but also pushed to you in a very real-time reactive way, so that whatever you're doing, you're being fed help on the fly to avoid you having to stop and go look for a manual or having to look up something on Google, to keep you focused on the task at hand. Although there's endless talk about mobile devices and how do we flow content for these tiny screens, I'm trying to remind people that actually in parallel to this, we're seeing bigger and bigger screens coming out. Not only are desktop monitors getting significantly larger, all of us have these huge data-enabled displays in our house. TVs are now basically computers and viewing devices for the internet. My TV's got a 1 terabyte drive attached to the back of it for streaming video and multimedia, and attaches to my LAN. And we're seeing touch and gesture ability with TVs, making them much more flexible a tool for interacting with content. So if you focused everything on formatting something so that it can go down to the 2-inch screen, did you forget the 4-foot screen? These touch screens are going to be in offices, or they are in offices, in retail kiosks, on shop floors of maintenance centers, more and more and more. And then, of course, on the other extreme, we're just seeing the first generation of really popular smart watches, which are a symbiotic device which uses the processing power of your smartphone to extend computing onto your body as a wearable device. And of course, one of the most controversial is of course Google Glass, which I'm a big fan of. I got to try that. Actually got to try one on a few weeks ago, and it's a little bit slightly underwhelming. There's huge expectations for it. It's a little bit like the first cell phones, where it's great, you know it's going to be great, but the first incarnation looks like a first incarnation. However, I'm totally behind the idea that this is where computing is going to go. The market is asking for computing that doesn't get in the way, that doesn't make me stop what I'm doing to go enter some search parameters, to go look something up in a table of contents. We want knowledge and content available right there in the moment, sometimes before we've even asked for it. One of the things that Google Glass is being touted for is it is probably the first application out there that may give us some mass market augmented reality applications. Most of you may have heard of augmented reality, but not quite clear what it's for and where and how it might affect the world of content. This example is from a few years ago, I think it's 6 years ago now, from BMW, where BMW was prototyping augmented reality glasses for automotive engineers so that they could have the ability to walk up to an engine and their real view of the engine would be augmented with computer-generated imagery. So you can see we've got the real hands of the real engineer working on the engine, and they're being told what to do with these graphic hands that have been generated, and they animate and they tell them, grab this piece and move it up like that, and they kind of repeat until he says next step, and then with that audio command, the glasses know to move on to the next step and tell them what to do next. IKEA has released their augmented reality calendar, which I think is a killer app for a company like IKEA. This is on the other end of the spectrum in terms of who it's aimed at. This is aimed at everybody. You just get their catalog and install the app, and then the real world and the catalog come together to allow you to preview what their merchandise might look like in your house. So you can say, okay, if I was going to put this couch here, how would that look? Would it fit? What color would I want? And stuff like that. And so basically you put the catalog down, and the phone recognizes the physical catalog and then superimposes this 3D image of whatever product you want in the real world. So you can get this preview in your mobile device of what these real world objects will look like. So I think we're just in a waiting period, we're in a holding pattern until these different technologies come together for more standardized, recognized industrial apps, the kind of things that techno-communicators will be very interested in being involved in. I know that Audi and actually several of the German car manufacturers are getting big into augmented reality. And after I presented this recently, I had 2 of my former clients come up to me and say, actually, they are in production or prototyping augmented reality for things like router documentation, or router, depending on how you say that, but the internet routing devices in your house. For how to set up your router at home, how to configure it, you just point the phone at the router and it shows you where to plug in the cables, things like that. Or for enterprise B2B goods, I've got customers in medical devices that have these large complex devices, and they want engineers to be able to just point a tablet and at a device and be told where to put spares and how to do procedures, just like the BMW example. Google Cards is something many of you will be using, but many of you may not even be aware that it's called Google Cards. So Google Cards are things like this, and they are these little micro snippets of content which Google gathers together and feeds you based either on queries or on whatever you happen to be doing at the time. So if you look something up now on a Google smartphone, then it will feed you this card here, and it's a little bit of content, maybe an image, and then it's a jump-off point to more content. And you don't even get to choose how your content is formatted. You have to feed Google the raw data, and they will format it into a card. And of course, you can see that they're going to be taking advantage of everything that the phone has. So if the thing that they're talking about has a location, you might be able to use GPS to get there. You might be able to add a reminder to your calendar, and so on and so on. So this is actually the kind of thing that you see in Google Glass. When you look through that little Google Glass window, you actually see a screen that looks kind of like that floating about a meter in front of you. And that tiny, tiny screen is what a lot of applications will have to start formatting content for. What I like about it is it demonstrates first this this API-like exposure of the content, where you have to give me an interface to the content and my application needs to be able to suck it up. And also, it's a complete separation of format and content. So because Google has taken over the formatting of the content, it forces the original content provider to really focus on their content and nothing else. Nothing about layout, nothing about styles. And we're going to be seeing more and more of this, I think, as the technology moves forward. So what do we do about a world that has been battering us since the internet became mass market with new revolutions in communication every couple of years? And I think that the answer is in standards, consistency, and community. And I think that that has been the answer for a while, and it's going to continue to be in the future. So Standards 101. I'm just going to clarify what I mean by standards, because I realize I gave this bits of this presentation once before, and I realized a lot of people didn't have the same idea in their mind of what a standard exactly was. So there are the most, I think, obvious ones, mandated industry-regulated standards. So ISO 26262 is a safety standard which many of my clients have to comply with, and if you don't show that you can comply with the ISO safety standards and you're audited, you're not allowed to sell your product. S1000D is a military and defense standard for holding documentation content, and if you don't supply in that, then the buyer won't buy your products. And then there's also, of course, various medical and pharma standards, which you have to be able to be safety audited against at any point. And I have a couple of clients who are in gambling software. And you have to have certain data exposure laws and transparency laws, and they vary by country. So what you need to say and what you're allowed to say will be very different depending on what country you're publishing to, and they have to constantly be on top of all the variations in their content that are implied by standards. Then we have voluntary standards. That can come from official standard bodies or just really popular communities. And this includes the thing that I think in tech comms we most refer to when we say standards out of context, which is formats like HTML, XML, SVG, DITA, PDF, HTML microformats, which are an attempt at semantics in HTML, where you have a microformat for things like an event in time, a person, an author, and so on, where you can put that in any website and then other applications can pick up your semantics and process them. Technical Simplified English is a standard for how you write, what words you're allowed to use, and you can test your writing against Technical Simplified English to see how well it measures up against the standard. Then we have de facto standards, or standards that are pseudo-standards because there's just one market leader which is so dominant that it becomes a standard even though by no real definition should it be. PDF is now an open standard as of 2008. They released it. It now has its own ISO, which is the International Standards Organization number. But before that, PDF was just a format made by Adobe, and you had to work with them to be able to work with PDF. They realized that it would be better if everyone was exchanging PDFs, and they tried to secure that hold in the position for PDF by making it an open standard that everyone could work with. Oracle and SQL Server are pseudo-standards. They're not really standards at all. The fact that people use Oracle and SQL Server databases in their organizations. But if you have been through enterprise software acquisitions, you know it can be really hard to put your product in place if it doesn't support one or the other. And you get entire enterprises which will standardize on one, and then everything has to run on Oracle. Everything has to run on SQL Server. And they don't want what one of my friends calls exotic databases. MP3 is not actually a standard, but if you tried to release your album and anything else, good luck to you. And the QWERTY keyboard, I found out, I actually didn't realize this, but QWERTY, the standard layout that we know as a standard layout in the English-speaking world, is not a standard. That's just an industry practice which has developed over time, and everyone does it that way, but there's no rules around how you do a QWERTY keyboard. And then, of course, good old Microsoft Word in word processing, AutoCAD, and Photoshop. These are not endorsements for any of these things. I want to make that clear. It's just recognizing that if you didn't know how to use Microsoft Word, then that would be probably a problem for your professional career. If you were if you're in CAD and you don't know AutoCAD at all, then you're making yourself quite niche, or if in North America, niche. And Photoshop for digital images. Internal business rules. So I will talk about standards with a client, and I will talk about their standard. So your agreed and consistent way of implementing or using external standards. So you have the way that you're going to implement DITA. You're going to use HTML within your workflow. The process that you're going to take in order to be able to comply with something like ISO 26262. These are standards that you hold yourself against and are very important to develop. And how far they extend within your organization can make a lot of difference to how you're able to share and exchange content. So I'm going to get through some of the effects of standards. So we've had a list of them. We know what they are, but what are they really for? And for me, the way that I explained with the point of a standard to someone, to begin with, is I said that standards enable sharing. You take a standard interface like USB, and if you remember, if any of you are of the age to remember, before USB became ubiquitous, connecting any two devices or connecting peripherals to your hardware was a quite obnoxious affair. And in fact, now that there are about 4 or 5 different USB plug formats, it's becoming a bit annoying again. But for a while there, everything was going USB, and you can plug everything to everything. And even now, at least you can get an adapter to plug different USB things into each other. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for what standards are about. If you use a standard content format, then you can attach to other systems that use that same format much more easily, and you can share your content with them. If we come back to the Google Glass example, they set a standard for how you have to write your information so it can show up as a Google card or show up in Google Glass. And if you comply with the standard, you're able to share on those platforms. And if you don't, you can't. Standards enable efficiency. So if you're going to talk to your colleagues or to your management about the benefits of a standard, one of the big things there is a standard is something that's going to put in predictability. And predictability and repeatability is very important for efficient processes. They sound kind of like ugly words, predictable, repeatable, etc. But they're fundamental to business. And I use the assembly line example in that an assembly line is the ultimate manifestation, physical manifestation of a process which has been designed in great detail. It has many, many, many moving parts and actors, and at every stage, people are doing what they're supposed to do, passing on fluidly to the next stage. Automotive has been pioneering in this area for decades, and I have clients in automotive who've been telling me about their processes. They can't squeeze any more efficiency out of physical production because they've just nailed it. They have processes where they're manufacturing doors in one city for the cars, and they are manufacturing the bodies in another city. And they will put the doors on the truck in a specific order so that when the truck pulls up to the factory where the bodies are being made, they come off the truck in synchronization with the cars that are coming off the assembly line, so that they can be pulled off and put on the right car without having to go through a sorting process or a staging area. So that kind of level of automation and attention to process design is now moving into content. Physical manufacturing and production has really optimized, but how we deal with knowledge, digital assets, words, we really haven't applied that same kind of analysis or rigor to it. We haven't measured it properly, we haven't redesigned how we deal with it, and we have lots and lots of room for growth. So we are in the heyday of standardization and efficiency for content. Standards-free creativity, and this is immediately following the previous slide because it's the flip side of this idea that predictability and control is this kind of awful thing where we would never want our content to be crushed into a box like that. And I come to the Lego metaphor because Lego is something that we're often using to describe DITA systems, which is something that I've worked with a lot in the past. And any system where you have modular, reusable content. Basically, people want to be able to define certain types of blocks and then put them together in all sorts of different ways. And what they find is it is very powerful to standardize your content. It is very powerful to standardize your presentation and automate your presentation because it frees writers to write. It frees writers to focus on the creative act of writing great content. Writing great content is much more complicated than it used to be, and I'm going to get into the reasons why in a few more slides. But writers have so much to think about as it is. Having them also need to think about formatting, even for one output, so much as a dozen, really detracts from their writing time. And I've had companies whose writing time was dropping below 50%, so that you had a writer and most of the time they were chasing bugs in the output process, or they were formatting things, or they were copying and pasting, or they were chasing people around to find out if reviews had come in, and the time that they were actually able to spend on writing was actually becoming the minority of their time, even though they were engaged as a professional author or content creator. Standards lower risk. I don't know how many of you jumped off an airplane. I've only done it once, and I can highly recommend it. These aren't me in the photo, but I like this photo because I like this sense of freedom in this moment. And I can tell you, these people are able to be having such a blast because it's a very, very standardized process. It's all very process-driven. You arrive, you have a place to sit, a place to stand. You can see that they've got a procedure for how they roll up the chute, how they pack it into the bag, how they explain to you how the parachute's going to go on your body. They explain to you what's going to happen before you go on the plane. Everything is been put into standardized procedures. And those procedures have been vetted by international licensing bodies that say to you, yes, this organization has their procedures and their way of doing things up to scratch, so they have a license to run a parachute center. If you went to one of these places and you said, how do we do this? And they said, well, we're going to figure it out as we go along. That would not really provide you a sense of reassurance. Similarly, when you come to your manager and you say, I want to adopt a new content management system or a new way of storing documents, I want to move to format agnostic structured content, they're going to say things like, how do you know? How do you know it's going to work? Who else has ever done this? Are we the innovators? Are we the ones who are jumping out with the first shoot to see if it works, or what? With a standard, you'll be able to reply, no, this is actually something which is based on an internationally ratified standard. Maybe lots of our industry peers are doing it. Maybe our competitors have already done it. Maybe you are the first one in your industry, but you can refer back to the fact that the standard has been adopted elsewhere. It's not just you deciding everything. What that does is it allows you to streamline the project and focus on managing a smaller number of risk variables. That's very important to management. A project with lots and lots of risks is a concern. A project that has risks nicely localized and the rest based on reliable standards is something that's more comfortable for a manager to say, okay, well, I can sign off on that budget and I can support you on that because I can see you're plugging into something that's bigger than you and you're not empire building or experimenting with our budget. Standards build community. I'm a big fan of this photo. I know Jennifer likes it too. And if you ever come down to where I live to do a training course or something or a workshop, then remind me and I'll take you down here. This is the kite surfing community, about 45 minutes from my place, and they all just go crazy in this area all summer long. It's Spain, so you'll be in the water and someone will be whizzing by at 1 billion miles an hour, and there's no lifeguards or anything like that. But there is this whole community there, and they seem to know what they're doing. What I like about this image is it's so evocative of the scope of a community that can come together around something that they're passionate about. And the same thing happens in our industry. When you have a standard, like for example like DITA, it changes you. If you adopt it and you get educated on it and you engage the community, that can change your career. I can say that the growth in my career, a lot of my success, has been directly as a result of engaging with standards that had a future. Standards that were about separating people from vendor lock-in or platform lock-in and allowing them to take control of their content and ownership of their content, regardless of what software they wanted to use it in. And that community gives back a lot. We teach each other, we exchange, we do webinars like this. There's training that becomes available. All these things that happen if you join a standards community. One of my favorite projects was a company called Micro Focus, and they wanted to move from an existing XML standard that they had designed to the DITA standard, which is a international standard for doing structured content. And there was a lot of unsureness in the team before they made the migration, but they had certain goals, like we want to make it much easier to maintain this system. We want to make it easier to get skills to maintain the system because it was too costly for them to maintain their own system. Whereas DITA training, DITA services, DITA style sheet customizations, DITA templates are much more available, much more readily available from the community. They wanted to be able to put DITA skills required on their job specifications, so that the applicants would come in already knowing the baseline standard, and they would only have to learn the extra customizations or internal business rules that Micro Focus had defined. And they wanted to avoid increasing headcount and make it easier to find staff by moving to the system. I interviewed them three years later about how the project had gone, and they had met all of their goals. We had done a management presentation and said, if you sign off on this project, we'll be able to do this, this, and this within the next 18 to 24 months. And they've basically been able to tick all the boxes. The move to DITA from an existing XML format was still a big win for them. So moving from one standard to another richer standard built on top of it gave them an excellent business benefit. Which brings me squarely to the idea of that standards layer on top of each other. So I mentioned DITA a couple times. I've got DITA in the middle here. DITA is built upon various other standards that came before it. So DITA is built upon XML. Also has elements of information mapping, which is kind of a standard as well. The minimalism way of writing fed into the data methodology a lot. XML was, of course, built on general structuring of content and the various other markup languages that became before XML, like SGML. And it's also built on the Unicode text format, because XML is just a text file. And then up at the top, I've got output standards. You've got apps, HTML, SVG, and so on. Over on the right-hand side, I've got Tin Can, which is a standard API for connecting to learning management systems. Things like JSON, RSS for processing and syndicating your content. Over on the far left, Technical Simplified English, and XLIF for translation. Up in the corners, top right, I've got Lean, top left, Agile, standard project, and process methodologies. So all these can be used in conjunction, and I have clients who are taking advantage of, like, they're ticking all the boxes because their system is large enough and has a need for all these different functions, and they use standards wherever possible. And by using standards, you have a better chance of interoperability. Standards speak fast. This example here, when you roll up to a stoplight, you don't look at that and go, red above yellow above green. I've seen that somewhere before. You know what a stoplight means. You can drive anywhere in the world, and you immediately recognize that configuration, and you know what to do and how to act. It's completely embedded in you because it has built itself into your perception of the world. This takes me to semantics. This slide is from a fellow blogger and speaker, Kai Weber, who some of you may have heard of. He talks about how we create meaning. We compare each individual situation with personal past experience by matching patterns. And we build a mental model. A mental model being something that is semi-consciously selected with incomplete images. So semi-consciously in the fact that you see the stoplight, but you don't really think about the stoplight. You just see it and act. And it's an incomplete image. If you go see a stoplight that is shaped slightly differently, or the green, yellow, and red are slightly different tones, or it's not in the location you're usually used to, none of that really matters because you just refer back to the image of it, the general model of it, and it plays into what you understand about the world. Having an established mental model is very impactful on how you perceive your options, your solutions in a situation, and your confidence with dealing with it. Again, I live in Spain, so the stoplights are the same kind of stoplights, but they actually have a different behavior. So they have a flashing yellow mode, which you'll have to believe me, means cars can go and people can go at the same time, which is unheard of in any other country I've been in. It's the flashing yellow light basically means cars can advance, but be careful because you might hit somebody. So as I was first driving in this country, I found that completely through my confidence and completely through my sense of options. So when you diverge from a standard, the user experience changes dramatically and quickly. I've got another example here. I'm filling this one with relatable anecdotes. You can see that. And it talks about user experience. This is an experience I had while on client site in China. And I was in Shenzhen. And it was late at night, and I needed to get cash. And I walked up to the cash machine, and I saw this. And I don't speak any Mandarin whatsoever. But I had a need, and I had to go for it, so I thought I can do this. I've used a cash machine before. I was presented with the next screen, and I had no idea what any of this said, but there's only one button over here in the bottom right, so I couldn't go that far wrong. I get some more stuff, and I get a text box. I don't know what any of it says, but what do cash machines ask you for? They ask you for your PIN code. So I put in my PIN code, and I get some options. So top right or top left. It's not going to be anything else really to withdraw cash. So I went for it, the idea that we read from left to right, even though I'm in China and I don't know if that really applies. And turns out I bet right. So I'm presented with numbers. Choose an amount of money you want to take out. I'm guessing that says in Chinese. In Mandarin. I grab my amount. I'm guessing that says please wait. I can see that I'm learning Mandarin as I go. And ta-da, I've given some money. Would you like to print a receipt? A receipt. I'm learning some more Mandarin. I'm guessing these are yes and no. Thank you very much for using our machine. So that was an experience where I was able to see that adhering to information design standards and layout standards enabled me, a completely novice to this machine user, to effectively use it with actually a reasonable amount of confidence. It was quite a funny experience. I enjoyed it a lot. I clearly had the presence of mind to whip out my camera to photograph the whole thing in case I wanted to blog about it or webinar about it later. I must say, though, that it was quite late, and it was only when I was putting these slides together a full 2-3 years later, as you can see by the date in the bottom right corner, that I happened to notice this. So that was a little bit embarrassing, but it taught me a good life lesson anyway. So I've got about 15 minutes left on the clock. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bad side of standards. So as much of an advocate as I am with standards, I don't want to give the impression that standards are cure-alls. So how long should a resume be? This question has a standard answer to it. So I'm guessing that many of you are saying a page or 2 pages and might be quite confident in that answer. I'm friends with Jack Molisani. He's author of Be the Captain of Your Career, Career Planning Guide. And we had this discussion, and he said as long as it needs to be to get the job done. That is the correct answer to that question. A resume or a CV is a decision-making tool for the person that you are giving it to so that they can decide whether they want to speak to you anymore. They can decide whether they want to bring you in for an interview. So whether it's 2 pages, 3 pages, or 1 page, or 5 pages is really irrelevant. The question is, how much does that person need to know to accomplish the task? That is the real measure. So having a standard which has become so embedded that you're no longer thinking about it and thinking really about what the business problem is, that's when the standard has started to damage the situation and no longer help it. So standards do not get you out of hard information architecture work or major decisions. I'm going to reference DITA again. Some people think that going to DITA means that they don't have to create a content model. They don't have to do information architecture or information analysis because DITA provides them all that. It doesn't. It provides you a baseline, and then you have to do your content modeling, your information architecture on top of it. Understanding your users and their many profiles. You can be using standards for your benefit in your organization, but have you really analyzed how that is impacting the end user experience? Has the use of standards given them what you hoped it would give them? Are you measuring for performance against their needs? So you've got a standard in place. You may have saved money off translation. You may have decreased content cycle time or time to market. But are users happier? Are you actually taking advantage of the situation and measuring that to get real metrics back? So that's all the great stuff about standards. I'm going to use my last little bit to talk about what's holding us back from adopting standards. If standards are so great, why aren't we all using them? When I look at the history of communication and how we got to this situation, I go all the way back. And something that I saw when I was looking back on the history of content or communications was that around the world, prior to a certain point, none of us could really do perspective. We couldn't translate our 3D world onto a 2D surface. So everything came out a little bit flat and a bit odd and distorted. About 1,000 years ago in China, they started to get close. They started to get perspective that looked more like what we would call perspective. And then in the Renaissance in Italy, two guys figured out a mathematical formula that said, if the object is this far away in the real world, it should be on this position in the canvas. And they created a methodology for rendering 3D space onto the 2D canvas. And they created perfect perspective for the first time in images. What's key for this, and the reason I'm telling you about this, is that 500 years ago, there were two people on the planet that could do this. Now, we teach it to children. Now, if you're an adolescent and you don't know perspective, you can't do perspective, you're not really good at art. So we've gone to a place where what was a highly specialist technical skill has become ubiquitous. And what I'm making a comparison to is that what I am seeing skills like information architecture, structured writing, content modeling, taxonomy and classification. All these are very modern, very a bit frightening kind of esoteric terms that are taking hold in communications. But I think there's every reason that they're going to be as ubiquitous because every human in the world now has so much content that they have to manage, so much information that they touch, that classifying, sorting, finding, dividing, recompiling content are going to be as fundamental as any other skills we have with dealing with the world around us. This is because the real world doesn't work like today's documents. Customer experience is a four-dimensional thing. So what do I mean by that? Some of you may have seen this, a little bit before. It's kind of becoming my stairway to heaven because so many people want to hear about it because it's so fundamental. We all know about length and width in content. We've got the length and width of a column where we lay out our information. But modern content also has depth. So the ability to drill down into information. So you may have heard the term progressive disclosure, where you provide a certain amount of information and the user is able to expose more content by interacting with the medium progressively. So they get information in stages. You can also maybe allow them to see more information based on other actions that they might take. Multi-asset relationships and references, so cross-references, read more links, related items. These are all additional depth to whatever it is you're looking at right now. Search and social create this idea where we start at one level and then we can drill down and find out more and explore a certain topic. And then of course there's time. When you're in a digital medium in today's world, you've got dynamic and real-time content and pages that didn't exist until you asked for them. You've also got audience and context-specific content where pages are being built particularly for a certain type of user, particularly for you, particularly for people who are logged in, particularly for people who own this product or are standing in this location. So our whole 4D world is what makes up customer experience. That's what the person really experiences, not just an interface, not just words on a page. But we conceive content in 2D. We were taught to write introduction, first paragraphs, conclusion in this very linear way with good transitional binding sentences to hold it all together. And then when we talk about it and when we display it, we think about page 1 where we do a search and we click a link. We move over to page 2 where we might scan up and down to number 3 to read some more, but then we might download a PDF and move over to page 4, or area 4. But that's not actually the way it really works in the real world. In business, we can nicely separate these all into the search engine results page, the landing page, and the PDF, and we can separate them by department so that the search engine results and the landing page are owned by marketing, and then the PDF with the real meat to it is owned by communications. That's not how the customer sees it. The customer has an experience in 4D with content. So they will say, I want an answer now, at this particular moment, and I want something that's relevant to what I'm doing in this moment that I'm searching for it. And they will drop through those layers in a couple of clicks. So they've moved from a third-party website to your website to a PDF within seconds. So there's no separation for them. There's no sense of this was released a year ago by TechComms, this was updated last week by marketing, and then this is handled by our public relations company, which handles our SEO stuff. They're seeing it as one thing. So if there's any disconnect between these on facts, terminology, style, then they're going to see that side by side, and they're going to question you if there's not a coherent experience being offered across all those touch points. So all today's content needs database-like agility. We need to be able to query it, check it, find it, transform it, and pull it together into coherent experiences across all the dimensions of a customer's experience. I've got an example of Twitter. Twitter is a great one. Twitter is huge, but why? Is it because we can pack so much meaning into 140 characters? I don't think so. I think Twitter is really great because it has all these little jump-off points. So David Farby is talking about a presentation by Tom PSK at the Congility 13 conference, and he mentions it was about e-learning, and it was featured in ILT June 2003 issue, and he's provided us a link. So now we can learn more about e-learning and drill down into that area. We can find out more about Tom SBK. We can find out more about the Congility 2013 conference, or more about ILT magazine. Of course, we can also zoom up a level. And what I'm saying here is that more metadata is more perspectives. Each time you tag something, each time you provide these metadata hooks, it's like you're handing people the tops of these content pyramids that they can drill down into. And I was saying we can zoom up a level as well and find out about David Farby himself. For time, I'm going to skip a couple more of my examples, but those will be in the slides afterwards. But I want to come to the idea that because customer experience is four-dimensional, the next challenge will be updating our mental models for 4D content. And standards can help us do that. There are standards which are more suited to four-dimensional experience, to real-life customer experience, than the standards we use today, or the formats and the ways that we use today. By building a standard way of representing content, you can get extensive benefits for the modern world, for real customer experience. I've got an example. This is content as we know it today. It's a function overview. This function is called the info view, and the info view is a part of the UI of the product I mentioned earlier, Ableton Live, and it says the info view is a very handy resource that will tell you almost anything that you tell you about almost anything you point your mouse over, etc., etc. And we've got a screenshot here of the part of the UI and this little question mark showing you this is the shortcut key for the info view. And I use this in workshops to teach content modeling for content that adapts to many situations, content that adapts to four-dimensional customer experience. So I give them the content, and I give them a semantic skeleton of what all functional overviews should look like, what they should contain. So they should all contain a function title, which will optionally contain a win title. Then they all must contain a short description, and then optionally they can be followed by an overview, screenshot, shortcut, etc. And because you can only have one of most of them except for a screenshot, or you can have any number. And hopefully you figured out that M stands for mandatory and O stands for optional. And they do okay. So they find the win title reasonably easily, short description reasonably easily, and then they start getting a bit confused because maybe they can find the overview. And here's where they start to struggle because they'll start to try to figure out how do the short description and overview relate to each other and where's the shortcut and so on. They can guess which bits they are, but the fact that the shortcut and the screenshot are inside the overview can throw them, because then we're actually dealing with levels and not just dealing with straight blocks of style the way that you would in unstructured Word or FrameMaker. Once they do figure all this out, then we talk about how you can map the skeleton of your content to different scenarios. So if I'm publishing the tooltip, I'm going to pull out the function title, the win title, and the short description, and I'm also going to give the shortcut. The tooltip is the little piece that pops up inside the actual software user interface. So in that scenario, I don't want the screenshot because it's already in the UI, and I don't want the overview because that's just too much text for an embedded scenario, so I'm just pulling out those bits. In the actual print manual, I'm going to pull out all of them, and in the help view, which is the sort of richer help interface inside the application, I'm going to pull them all out except for the screenshot and the shortcut. So you get the same content again, but sliced slightly differently. Then I can map them again against personas. I could say that basic users need different components than advanced users, and maybe map them against specific versions like Pro, Lite, Studio, etc. The idea here is that once I've defined this, this model for my content, I can map that across all these different scenarios and all these different contexts, so I can do queries. I can say, get me all the function titles and short descriptions across all the function titles and all the function overviews that I've ever written, and return them all as an index. Or build me a quick reference which just contains function title and short description for all the functions for this version of the product. That ability to manipulate our content like data allows us to adapt to all the different scenarios, all the different kinds of devices that we have coming down on us in the modern publishing environment. So once we model content properly, once we develop our own standard for how we do things, we're in a position to deliver the right list, right content, right format, right language, right time. And as a content strategist, I think that your content strategy should be the meeting point between your business goals and your user needs. So when you say right content, right format, etc., you have to have both those things in mind. What does the business want? What does the user want? And how can I get the best for both so that they have a happy and a long relationship with each other? Standards help us get a head start so we can focus on the hard stuff. Inventing something like HTML microformats or HTML5 or PDF or DITA, that's way too much investment for somebody, for any organization to do on their own. Even IBM, in all its heft and might, developed DITA only to a certain standard, and then they published it out as a public standard so that they could get the whole world involved in developing it further, because it was just too expensive. They were getting a huge return, but they knew it would be even better if they made it a public standard. So the takeaways here, I'm just over the hour now. I want people to not think about their year at the expense of their career. When you're thinking about standards, you're looking at the longer term. Even if you're not with the company past a couple of years, if you're in a project where standards were implemented, as I showed earlier, as I talked about earlier, that can be beneficial for the rest of your career life. We're all responsible for the whole customer experience. There's a lot of siloed thinking that wants to break things down into what technical communicators do versus marketing communicators versus business communicators versus support, and so on. Customers don't care about the separations, and those silos are damaging. So I think we should all be taking firsthand responsibility for that customer experience. We have to collaborate across those silos. And structuring content gives it the agility that it needs. So if you have a standardized structure, then you can do more with your content in more ways. And then finally, you're not making it, you're making them. You're not making a manual or a website or a app. You're making content which may appear and may be delivered to many manuals, many apps, many websites over time. And so if you think with long-term use of your content in mind, you're treating it like an asset in your business that will be leveraged again and again, as opposed to ticking a box on a project requirement list. And that's really what I think is the way of the future. So this June 18th to 20th in Gatwick in the UK, we're going to be talking about a lot about standards and about driving revenue from across the enterprise. So how could we can all engage in the business process, engage with the customer experience across different silos. We're going to have a great list of speakers there. You can see me up again in the top right there. 2 conference days, 1 workshop day where we'll be talking about these kind of topics. Pre-registration is open now. Oh, I've got a little carriage return problem there. On our new mobile-friendly website. So do check it out, Congility.com/2014. Hope to see you there. That is brought to you by Urbina Consulting in conjunction with Mecon. We are co-organizers of the event. Okay, so thank you very much. If you want to know more about me, 2 good places are at Urbina, my Twitter, and the Content Strategy book. My website, urbinaconsulting.com, is also good. That was recently launched. And we're ready for the Q&A. Sorry, I'm 5 minutes over time. Sorry about that, Jennifer.
That is quite all right. Thank you so much, Naz. Because we are a little over time, I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions. Please feel free to, again, type your questions into the question bar. Again, the webinar has been recorded and will be available for playback at dclab.com. So you can go anything that those of you who've left have already left and don't hear me saying this. It's great that we have that available. If anyone runs out of time now and would like to hear the Q&A, feel free to come back. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in, so I'll start with that. If we run out of time, we will certainly do our best to get back to you via email, but please, we do have time to take maybe one more if anyone would like to ask a question in the bar. Okay. I think you may have answered this over the course of the webinar, Naz, and it did come in a little later, but I think it might be interesting to discuss. Can you talk more about public standards, and if the benefit there in part is that they're adaptable or malleable, and should a standard be adaptable or malleable?
Very, very interesting question. I think I talked a little bit about that, but I wouldn't say that I answered it completely.
Okay.
A public standard is, it can be malleable, but it depends on your definition of malleable. Well, I did a webinar last week, and someone asked me about taxonomy and recording metadata, but doesn't the standard already have attributes assigned for that? The public standard has certain placeholders in place and certain places for you to put your content. But it's you, as an organization, that decides what goes in the boxes. So they've laid things out, and they have an agreed way that things should be constructed, but you then internally decide, these are our agreed terms, these are our agreed attribute values, these are our agreed document structures or page layouts. All that is you adding flexibility on top of the platform. I imagine a standard like, like when they build a skyscraper and you can see that time when you've got all the girders and everything in place, but it's not a building yet. Until you come in there and fill it out and put in floors and decorate it and choose what kind of windows you want and everything, it's not going to be a building. Just because you have that framework in place doesn't mean there's not already lots of flexibility.
Great. I'm going to phrase this one with a bit of a caveat. So the question is, have you worked with clients who were standards resistant? And if you had a standard resistant person, let's say if you were trying to make the business case, or if you were someone internally in an organization trying to make the business case, how might you go about that with the understanding, and this is my caveat, that you can't necessarily speak about a specific client example?
I could probably speak about client examples as long as I don't name names.
Right.
Has somebody been standards resistant? A little bit, in that sense that you have an organization, for example, if they've already built their own thing, the idea of saying, oh, we're going to come in and replace it with a standardized version of what you've built, that can be a very emotional situation because they have built this thing. It's theirs. They own it. They know it. They're intimate with it. And I think anybody who's built anything can sympathize with that feeling. So they're not really resistant to the standard per se. They're more resistant to changing away from whatever situation they're in now. Somebody resistant to the idea of a standard in the sense of, well, if it's a standard, then it's probably not well adapted to us. I don't get a lot of that. That's possibly because of the people who invite me in. But one of the main things that they do is they invite me in to talk to their colleagues. So I, in fact, talk to many more colleagues of my clients than I do the direct person who invited me in. And generally speaking, no. People like the idea of a standard because they can see that it provides all the benefits that I was talking about. So the general advice I would give you in that situation, find out what the real concern is. Why are they actually concerned about the project or the standard? It's probably not because it's a standard. That's, I think, a very rare thing. If it is that, then yeah, you might struggle. If they're really a kind of a wasn't made here kind of person and they just really want to reinvent the wheel each time, that's a very particular personality, and that's kind of dyed in the wool. I don't think that it's very easy to shift that kind of mindset.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for now. I am going to leave the webinar open for another 5 minutes. If any questions occur to anybody, we will get back to you by email. I want to, again, thank Naz Urbina for spending his time with us today in what was a really informative and really fun, to my mind, webinar. I hope you all had a great time, and I hope we see you again. You can always check out our webinar list at dclab.com/webinars to see what else we have coming up. Naz, thank you so much.
Can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
I think in past I was emailed the questions and I responded by email.
Yes.
So if anyone puts in any questions now, then that I can get back to them.
Absolutely, and I will pass those on to you at the end of the day. Also, by the same point, I would encourage anyone who's hanging out on Twitter to take a look there for Naz. I believe, tell me again, you're at Naz Urbina?
Correct.
At Naz Urbina, or for us, we're at DC Laboratory, and we can also chat with you there. So thank you so much, everyone, and go out and have a great day.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ciao.
Cheers.